The lights on the stage were too bright. They made the whole street look clean, even though it wasn't. Vought had set up a giant screen, a long red carpet, and a tall metal ring that looked like a fancy doorway. It was called the Vought Quantum Mirror, and the host kept smiling like nothing could go wrong. "Today," the host said, "we show you the future." A Vought scientist stood near the ring with a tablet in his hand. His smile was tight. He kept glancing at the black vans parked behind the stage, like he was waiting for someone to yell, "Stop!" Behind the cameras, a Vought PR woman whispered into her headset, "If anything happens, we call it a heroic first contact. Got it? And someone get me a list of names. We need names." The ring hummed. The air inside it turned white, like fog in a box. Then the white fog cracked. It wasn't a normal crack. It was like the air had turned into glass and someone had hit it with a hammer. The crack spread up into the sky. People gasped. Phones rose like a field of glowing rectangles. The scientist stepped back, eyes wide. "That's not—" A loud pop hit the street. Not an explosion. More like a door slamming open across reality. Something fell out of the crack. A man hit the pavement hard enough to break it. The shock went through the ground. The stage lights flickered. The giant screen went black for half a second, then came back. The man stood up like it was nothing. He wore a bright suit. Red. Blue. A cape. The symbol on his chest was sharp and simple. Another figure dropped beside him. A woman in armor. A sword on her back. Dark hair. A calm face. Then a third shape landed in a crouch. A teenage boy with a black cape and a sword. His eyes moved fast, like he was already counting targets. And last came a heavy thud as a man made of metal hit the ground. He was big, with a glowing eye, and a body that looked half machine, half person. For one small moment, the crowd forgot to be scared. People cheered. "New heroes!" someone yelled. The PR woman nearly cried with joy. "Yes! Yes! Keep cheering! Get the angles! Get me a logo mock-up in 10 minutes!" But the man in blue did not smile. He looked at the cameras first, then at the crowd, then at the armed guards by the vans. His eyes narrowed, like he could hear something no one else could hear. The armored woman looked at the Vought banner and the giant screen, and said very quietly, "This is not our world." The metal man tilted his head. Confirmed. Different signal patterns. Different satellites. Different everything. The boy with the sword stared at the armed guards and said, "They're aiming too slow." A shadow fell over the stage. A figure floated down in a cape of his own, wearing a perfect smile that didn't touch his eyes. Homelander arrived like it was a movie scene made for him. He landed on the red carpet, hands open, face bright for the cameras. "Wow," he said, loud enough for every mic. Vought really outdid itself today. The crowd roared. They knew him. They loved him. They feared him too. But that was part of the love. Homelander turned toward the newcomer, still smiling. "Welcome to America," he said. "I'm Homelander. I don't know who you are, but you look like you're trying to steal my—" His eyes flicked to the man in blue. He saw the way the man stood. He saw the calm. He saw the lack of fear. Homelander's smile tightened. He took one step closer. "My spotlight." The man in blue did not move. His voice was even. "Step back." Homelander laughed, because the cameras demanded it. "Or what?" He shoved the man in blue in the chest. It should have been a power move, a message, a warning. Nothing happened. The man in blue did not slide. He did not bend. He did not even blink. The crowd's cheering dipped into confusion. Homelander's eyes flashed red. The armored woman shifted her weight. The boy's hand went to his sword. The metal man's eye brightened. Homelander fired heat vision. 2 red beams hit the man in blue's face like burning lines. They did nothing. The beams bent away, like they were hitting a wall. The air around the man in blue rippled for a second. And then the beams stopped because Homelander stopped. Homelander's mouth opened slightly. The man in blue leaned forward, just a little, and spoke so softly only Homelander and the nearest mics caught it. You don't get to threaten people just because they clap for you. Homelander tried to back up without looking like he was backing up. He failed. The man in blue lifted one hand and pressed it to Homelander's chest, gently, like he was stopping a child from running into traffic. Homelander could not move forward. He could not move at all. The armored woman stepped into view and faced the cameras. "This world is sick," she said, "and it doesn't know it yet." The PR woman whispered, shaking. "Okay, pivot, pivot. We call them the Liberty League. No, better. The Justice." The boy with the sword cut her off with a glare that felt like a knife. "Stop talking." The crowd went silent, and far above, the crack in the sky widened again, as if something on the other side had noticed where they landed. The first thing Stan Edgar did was not panic. He watched the footage in a quiet office, hands folded, face calm. The room smelled like coffee and expensive wood. A VOD analyst spoke fast. "Sir, we don't have IDs, no records, no match. Their costumes don't fit any known team." Edgar nodded once. "And power levels?" The analyst swallowed. "Unknown." But the flying man just ignored Homelander's lasers. Edgar's eyes did not widen. They did not narrow. His voice stayed the same. "Bring them to the tower. Offer them a place. Offer them contracts. Offer them respect." The analyst blinked. "Contracts?" Edgar leaned back. "Everything is a contract. If they refuse, we learn why." On a different side of the city, in a small, messy safe house, Huey Campbell stared at the same footage with his mouth open. "Butcher," Huey said, voice thin. "Did you see that? Homelander, he couldn't move him." Billy Butcher didn't answer right away. He was watching the man in blue's face. The calm, the way he didn't show off, the way he didn't even try to be liked. Butcher's jaw worked like he was chewing nails. "That," Butcher said, "is not our kind of soup." Mother's Milk crossed his arms. "Meaning?" Butcher pointed at the screen. "Meaning Vought's top dog just met a bigger dog." Frenchie leaned forward, eyes shining with fear and curiosity. "Mon Dieu." He took the lasers like it was nothing. Kimiko watched in silence. Her fingers tapped a fast rhythm on her knee. She didn't like the feeling in the room. It felt like the world had tilted. Huey swallowed. "So, is this good? Like, for us?" Butcher's eyes stayed on the screen. "Could be the best thing that ever happened." He paused. "Could be the worst." Back at Vought Tower, the newcomers stood in a wide, polished room with glass walls. It looked like a penthouse. It was meant to impress. It was also meant to trap. Cameras were hidden in the corners. Microphones were in the lights. Security stood outside the doors with guns that were mostly for show. A PR team came in with clipboards and bright smiles. "Hi," the lead woman said. "Welcome. We are so honored. We have, a few quick things. Names first. Public names. Something catchy. The people need..." The boy with the sword stepped forward. "You're loud." The PR woman laughed nervously. "That's my job." The metal man's eye glowed as he looked around. "These walls are full of sensors." A Vought tech tried to act casual. "Standard security." The man in blue turned his head slightly. His eyes tracked something across the room, as if he could see through the glass and steel and into the floors below. His voice was calm, but it had weight. "How many people have died in this building?" The PR woman froze. I'm sorry? The armored woman moved closer to the man in blue. Her tone was steady. We should leave. The man in blue didn't move. Not yet. A Vought executive entered with a practiced smile. Hello, I'm Ashley Barrett. Welcome to Vought. We want to help you. We want to make sure you're comfortable. The boy snorted. Comfortable. Right. Ashley kept smiling. Her hand shook a little at her sides. We have a suite for you. Food, clothes, medical staff. We don't need your staff, the armored woman said. Ashley blinked. Okay, great. So, maybe just a photo? A handshake? Something for the press. The man in blue looked straight at her. Tell your boss I want the truth. Ashley's smile slipped for half a second. Then it snapped back. Of course. We love truth. The metal man spoke, voice lower. He's coming. Ashley's eyes flicked. Who's coming? The metal man tilted his head. The one behind your walls. A door opened behind the glass. Stan Edgar walked in with 2 guards who stayed outside. He wore no cape, no costume, no smile. He stopped at a respectful distance. Welcome, Edgar said. We don't often get surprises. The man in blue studied him. You're in charge? Edgar didn't deny it. I manage Vought. The armored woman's eyes narrowed. You are not afraid. Edgar's voice stayed flat. Fear is useful. I try not to waste it. The boy with the sword stepped forward, hand near his blade. Say what you want. Edgar looked at him without flinching. I want stability. Your arrival is destabilizing. The man in blue's eyes hardened. Your world is built on lies. Edgar nodded once, like this was a business detail. Then you understand why I'm speaking to you privately. We can offer you resources, information, a place in this world. The boy scoffed. A leash. Edgar's gaze moved to the metal man. And you? You seem practical. The metal man's face tightened. Don't. Edgar went back to the man in blue. You want truth. Here is some truth. The people outside need heroes. They need symbols. If you act without structure, you will create chaos. The armored woman's voice was sharp. Chaos is already here. The man in blue spoke softly, but it cut through the room. If your heroes are real, I'll meet them. Edgar nodded. You already did. The man in blue glanced toward the window. Far away, he could hear the crowd still outside. He could also hear something else. A heartbeat, a nervous laugh, a whispered threat. He was listening to the city like it was a living thing. He took a slow breath. Bring him, he said. Annie January sat alone in a dressing room, staring at a mirror that didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore. Starlight's costume was on a chair. The star was too bright. The smile was too forced. Her phone buzzed nonstop. When she finally answered, it was Ashley, speaking too fast. Annie, sweetie, okay. Big moment. We need you in the lobby. You're going to welcome the newcomers. Big sister energy, warm, safe. America's sweetheart meets whatever they are. Annie felt her stomach turn. Are they dangerous? Ashley hesitated. We're figuring that out. Annie stood up. That means yes. Ashley tried to laugh it off. No, it's just… Homelander had a moment. A moment? Annie repeated, flat. He attacked them on live TV. Ashley lowered her voice. Just get down here. Annie hung up and stared at her reflection. She remembered Homelander's face when he realized he wasn't the strongest thing in the room. And she remembered the look on the man in blue's face. Not proud. Not excited. Like he'd seen this kind of world before, and it made him tired. Annie grabbed her costume. Okay, she whispered to herself. Let's not let this turn into a massacre. Homelander waited in the lobby like a king who had been insulted. His smile was back, but it looked painted on. His eyes moved too much. Vought's staff stayed far from him. Nobody wanted to be the one he snapped at. When the elevator doors opened, the newcomer stepped out. The man in blue walked first, the armored woman beside him, the boy behind, the metal man last. Homelander's jaw flexed. "So," he said, loud enough for the room, "you're the new toys." The man in blue looked at him once. No fear, no respect, just assessment. "You hurt people," the man in blue said. Homelander laughed. "I save people." "You sell yourself," the man in blue replied. Homelander's smile vanished. "You don't know anything about me." The armored woman spoke. "We know your type." Homelander's eyes flashed red again. The air in the room felt thinner. Annie arrived at the edge of the lobby, heart racing. She saw both sides and knew, in one instant, that nobody here had real control. She stepped forward anyway. "Hi," she said, voice as steady as she could make it. "I'm Starlight." The man in blue looked at her. His face softened a fraction. "You're not like him," Annie blinked. "You can tell?" "I can hear you," he said, simple. "Your heart isn't enjoying this." Homelander's head snapped toward her. "Annie." Annie ignored him. "Look," she said, careful. "This world is messy. But if you came here to help people, we can—" The armored woman cut in. "Help is not enough." The boy leaned forward. "This place needs cleaning." And he felt her skin go cold. "Cleaning?" The metal man spoke, quieter. "We should gather data first. We don't know the full picture." The boy rolled his eyes. "We know enough." The man in blue raised one hand. The room obeyed without realizing it. Even Homelander paused. "We will see the truth," the man in blue said. "Then, we will act." Edgar's voice came through a speaker nearby, calm and smooth. "That's reasonable." Annie looked up at the speaker. She hated how ready Vought was to use this. She also hated how much she wanted the man in blue to tear Vought apart, because she knew the cost might be worse than what came before. Later, in a secure floor, Vought called a welcome center. They tried to do scans. A doctor held a medical wand that shook in his hand. "If you'll just stand here." The man in blue stepped into the scanner. The machine beeped once, then died. The screen went black. The doctor laughed weakly. "Must be a glitch." The metal man's eye flickered. "It's not a glitch. Your system can't read him." The armored woman crossed her arms. "Your tools are toys." The PR woman hurried in again with a folder. Okay. We have name options. Ultra American. Sky Savior. Blue Justice. Or, if you want something more serious." The boy stared at her. "Leave." She squeaked and fled. The metal man moved toward a wall panel. He touched it. His fingers sank in like he was plugging into it. A Vought guard lifted his gun. "Hey!" The man in blue didn't turn. "Don't." The guard froze. Not because of magic, because of the way the word landed. The metal man's face tightened as data rushed through him. "This company tracks crime like a product. They create it. They profit from it." The armored woman's mouth curled. "Exactly." The man in blue's eyes sharpened. "Show me." A dozen screens on the wall lit up at once. Video clips, files, names, payments, cover-ups. Annie watched from the corner, hands clenched. She knew some of it. Not all. Huey and Butcher weren't there, but this was the kind of truth they'd die to get. Edgar's voice came through another speaker. "That information is restricted." The man in blue looked up at the speaker. "You restricted it from the people you claim to protect." Edgar didn't raise his voice. "The public can't handle every truth. It causes panic." The man in blue's face did not change. Panic is better than a lie that kills. The armored woman stepped beside him. We take the tower. We end the system today. The metal man pulled his hand back from the wall, breathing heavier than before. If we move too fast, they will fight. Not just with guns, with fear. The boy scoffed. Let them. The man in blue went quiet for a moment. Then he spoke to the metal man. Victor. Annie's eyes widened. A name. The armored woman's voice softened, but only a little. Clark. Another name. The boy rolled his eyes. You're doing it again. Edgar's voice came through the speaker, smooth as ice. Interesting. So you do have names. The man in blue looked toward the ceiling, toward the hidden microphones. And you do spy. He turned his head slightly, as if he could see the entire building at once. You're not inviting us, he said. You're trying to cage us. Edgar replied, Cages are for animals. This is structure. The man in blue's voice stayed even. Then you won't mind if I open the doors. Annie felt her pulse jump. Wait. Too late. Somewhere deep in the building, locks clicked. Not one. Hundreds. Elevators stopped obeying Vought keycards. Security cameras turned away from hallways. Screens across the tower flickered and showed the same simple message. Tell the truth. The metal man stared at his own hands. I didn't do that. The man in blue didn't look proud. He looked tired. I did. The armored woman exhaled like she'd been waiting for permission. Good. Outside, the sky crack pulsed again. A low hum rolled across the city like distant thunder. The man in blue looked up sharply. Something is still connected, he said. Annie stared at the windows. People far below were pointing at the sky, screaming, running. She whispered, What did we just bring here? The next day, Vought tried to turn fear into a product. They set up a massive unity rally in the heart of the city. It had flags, music, a stage, and a giant screen. They said it was to welcome our new allies. What it really was a trap with cameras. Ashley stood backstage, sweating through her blazer, speaking into her headset. We keep it friendly. We keep it controlled. Homelander, you do not. Homelander cut her off. I'm fine. He wasn't fine. He needed this. He needed the world to see him on top. He stepped onto the stage and smiled at the crowd. America, he boomed. Today is a big day. Today we show the world what real heroes look like. Behind him, the giant screen showed the man in blue and the armored woman, as if they were part of a brand deal. A bright logo floated beside them. Vought Presence, the Liberty League. Ashley swallowed a scream. In the crowd, Huey stood with a cap pulled low. His hands shook. Butcher stood beside him, calm in the way that meant danger. MM murmured, We get a shot at vote files in the chaos. That's the plan. Frenchie's voice crackled in Huey's earpiece. There are guards on every corner. Too many. Kimiko watched the rooftops like a hunting cat. Huey looked up at the stage. I don't like this. I really don't like this. Butcher's eyes were cold. Of course you don't. That means it's working. The man in blue arrived above the rally, floating without effort, cape moving in the wind. The armored woman hovered near him, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd like she was reading a battlefield. The boy landed on a rooftop, crouched, sword across his back. He looked bored and angry at the same time. The metal man stood near a streetlight and listened to radio chatter that wasn't meant for him. Annie stood at the edge of the stage as starlight, smiling because cameras were hungry. Her stomach felt like a knot. Homelander lifted his hands. Let's welcome our friends. He turned to the man in blue. Go on, say something inspiring. The man in blue looked down at the crowd. He didn't see fans. He saw people, regular people, some excited, some scared, some pretending to cheer because they didn't want to be noticed. He heard thousands of heartbeats, and beneath them, he heard Vought security radios. Hold positions. Wait for the signal. Make sure the cameras catch the first strike. His eyes narrowed. Homelander leaned in, smiling through his teeth. You hear that? They love us. The man in blue answered softly. They fear you. Homelander's smile twitched. Same thing. The man in blue's voice dropped lower. No, it's not. Homelander's eyes flashed red. Annie saw it and stepped forward. Fast. Hey! Okay, everyone, let's… Homelander fired first. His heat vision cut toward the man in blue's face again, like he was trying to fix yesterday's humiliation. The beams hit. They did nothing. The man in blue didn't even lift his hands this time. He just moved his head a fraction, like the lasers were sunlight, and he was bored of it. The crowd screamed. Phones shook. Homelander lunged forward to punch. The man in blue caught his fist. It was a simple grab. No flashy move, no spin. Homelander's whole body stopped like he ran into a wall. The man in blue spoke in a calm voice that still carried across the stage microphones. This ends now. He lifted Homelander by the wrist and set him down on the stage, like a toy being placed back on a shelf. Homelander's face went red with rage. He tried to swing again. The man in blue tapped Homelander's chest with 2 fingers. Homelander flew backward, not across the city, not into space, just enough to smash through the giant screen behind the stage. The screen shattered in glittering pieces. The fake logo died with it. The crowd fell silent in a way that felt heavy. Annie stared, breath caught. She'd seen Homelander hurt people. She'd seen him hurt heroes. She had never seen him handled like this. Wonder Woman landed on the stage with a hard thud. Her eyes locked onto Vought security around the edges. She didn't smile. Put your weapons down. A few guards raised their guns anyway. Damien dropped from the rooftop like a blade. He moved through the armed men in a blur of kicks, elbows, and flat strikes that knocked weapons away without killing anyone. His style was sharp and angry. His face showed no mercy, but his hands showed control. Pathetic, Damien muttered as another rifle clattered to the ground. Cyborg lifted one arm, and a pulse of sound hit a nearby drone. It fell out of the air like a rock. "Stop filming lies," he said. Ashley's headset screamed with voices. "Cut the feed! Cut it!" Cyborg's single glowing eye flicked toward the broadcast van parked near the rally. He didn't move his feet. The van's screens flickered anyway. Every phone in the crowd buzzed at once. Every billboard in sight changed. The city's giant displays stopped showing smiles and slogans. They showed files. They showed clips. They showed hidden footage of rescues that were staged. They showed payments. They showed names of people who disappeared. Huey's mouth fell open. "Oh my God," MM whispered. That's real." Butcher's eyes gleamed, like a man seeing a door unlock. Starlight looked up at the screens and felt sick because she recognized some faces. She recognized some rooms. Homelander climbed out of the broken screen behind the stage, shaking with rage. He looked out and realized something worse than losing a fight. He realized he was losing the story. He screamed, "Turn it off!" Cyborg's voice came through the rally speakers, calm and loud. "You can't sell the truth." Homelander's eyes glowed brighter. He launched himself at Cyborg. Superman was already there, one blur, one hand, on Homelander's shoulder. And Homelander stopped in midair like he hit invisible chains. Superman lowered him to the ground again, slow and humiliating. "You don't own this world," Superman said, voice firm. "And you don't own these people." Homelander shook, teeth bared. "You don't know what they are. They need me." Superman looked at the crowd again. His eyes were hard. They need protection, not worship. Wonder Woman stepped closer to Homelander. Her hand rested near her sword. He is a threat. End him. Annie's blood ran cold. She stepped between them without thinking. "Wait," she said, voice shaking but loud. "No. If you kill him here, you become exactly what he tells everyone to fear." Wonder Woman's eyes flicked to her. Fear keeps people in line. Annie swallowed. Or it breaks them. For a second, everything held still. The crowd was quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Superman stared at Homelander like he was deciding whether this world deserved a chance. Then Superman spoke, not to Homelander, but to the people watching. "This company lies to you," he said. "Your heroes are not guardians. They are products." He turned his head slightly, listening past the rally, past the streets. He could hear screaming somewhere else, far away, high above. The crack in the sky had widened again, and something was falling through it. A chunk of jagged metal, burning at the edges, screamed down like a meteor. Superman shot upward and caught it over the city before it hit a building. The impact still shook the air. Up close, the metal wasn't normal. It had strange marks. It carried a cold, sharp feeling that made Cyborg's systems spike and Wonder Woman's instincts flare. Cyborg looked up, voice tight. "That's from our side." Damian's eyes narrowed. "More is coming." Homelander stared at the sky, then at the crowd, then at Superman. His rage shifted into something else. Fear. Because for the first time, the danger wasn't just to his image, it was to his world. Superman lowered the jagged metal to the ground carefully, like it was a bomb. He looked at the crack in the sky. His jaw tightened. "This isn't finished," he said. And below him, Vogt's people scrambled to grab the falling pieces, already thinking about what they could build from them, while the boys watched the city screens spill truth into the open and realized the same thing at the same time. If gods were here now, then everyone would have to choose what kind of world came next. The city did not feel the same after the rally. It was louder in the wrong ways. Sirens, shouting, helicopters, people yelling into cameras like they could force the world to make sense again. On every screen, Vogt's clean story had a hole in it now, and holes spread. Huey stood in the safe house living room with his phone in his hand, watching the same clips again and again. Not because he enjoyed it, because his brain would not accept it. Homelander got picked up and set down like a toddler. Vought files flashed on billboards like the city itself got angry. And above it all, the crack in the sky stayed there, thin but real, like a scar that refused to close. Mother's milk paced near the window. He didn't look out too long. He didn't want to see the fear on the street. He had a daughter. He always saw kids first now. "Protests are spreading," said. "Some are peaceful. Some aren't. People are storming Vought shops. Vought security is hitting back." Frenchie sat on the floor, tools spread around him, like he was building something, even though nobody asked. That was how he stayed calm. "They lie for years," Frenchie muttered. Then one day, the lie breaks, and everyone bleeds. Kimiko stood near the wall. Her eyes moved to each person like she was checking if they were still alive. She hated waiting. Waiting always meant someone else chose what happened next. Butcher leaned on the counter with a mug in his hand, not drinking it. His eyes stayed on the TV. On the screen, the man in blue hovered above the city and held a jagged piece of burning metal like it weighed nothing. Butcher's mouth curled. "Bloody hell," he said quietly. "That's what real power looks like." Huey looked at him. "Don't say it like you like it." Butcher didn't blink. "I like results. That thing in the sky, that's a result." MM's voice sharpened. "And a problem." Butcher pointed at the screen. Vought's story is cracking. Homelander got embarrassed in front of the whole world. The tower is leaking secrets like a busted pipe. This is our best shot. Huey swallowed. At what? Butcher's eyes didn't move. At ending Vought. Huey wanted to believe it. He really did. But then the news anchor on TV said something that made his stomach drop. Sources inside Vought claim the broadcast was a foreign cyber attack, the anchor said, and that the newcomers are hostile. The clip changed. It showed the armored woman landing hard on the stage. It showed the sword kid hitting guards. It did not show the guards aiming at civilians. It did not show Vought's vans. It did not show who fired first. Vought was editing the truth in real time. MM cursed under his breath. They're flipping it. Butcher's smile stayed thin. Let them try. Huey stared at the screen. But the flying guy, he could just stop all of this, right? He could just crush Vought. Butcher finally looked at Huey. He could, Butcher said, and that's what scares me. Because if a god fixed the world, he might decide humans didn't get a vote anymore. Annie January sat on the floor of her apartment, with her knees pulled to her chest. Her costume was thrown over a chair, like it was a skin she wanted to peel off. Her phone buzzed constantly. Ashley, PR, lawyers, people who only sounded brave when they had a script. Annie didn't answer. She watched her own rally footage again, but not the official version. She watched the raw recordings that civilians posted before Vought could delete them. She watched the moment the man in blue looked at her and said he could hear her heart. She watched him stop Homelander without rage. No show, no grin, no look at me, just control. And then she watched Wonder Woman say, like it was simple, end him. Annie's chest tightened. She pressed her palm to her sternum like she could hold her fear down. A knock hit her door. She froze. Then she heard a calm voice from the hallway. Annie January? Her name, said like it was a fact. She stood up slowly and opened the door. He was there. Up close, he didn't feel like a celebrity. He felt like a storm that chose to be quiet. The man in blue. His eyes were steady. His face held no smile, but no cruelty either. Behind him, the metal man stood like a guard, but his posture was tired. Annie's voice came out small. How did you find me? He answered honestly. I listened. That was worse than a threat. It meant there was nowhere to hide. Annie swallowed. You shouldn't be here. I needed to speak without cameras, he said. Cyborg's eye flickered. There are always cameras in this world. The man in blue stepped inside anyway, careful not to break anything, like he didn't want to scare her. Annie backed up, keeping space. What do you want? He looked at her apartment, the small kitchen, the cheap furniture, the normal life. His voice softened, just slightly. Truth. Annie let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Then you came to the right person. Cyborg's tone was rough. Vought will come for you. I know, Annie said. They already did. They just used smiles instead of guns. The man in blue nodded once. You tried to stop bloodshed at the rally. Annie's hands clenched. I tried to stop you from becoming them. His eyes held hers. Do you think I'm like him? Annie's throat tightened. She forced herself to answer. I think you could be, if you decide fear is the only tool that works. Cyborg shifted, like that line hit close. The man in blue didn't get angry. He didn't deny it with a speech. He just said, in my world, we trusted people. We lost everything. Annie's voice turned quiet. And in this world, we never trusted anyone. We still lost a lot. For a moment, nobody spoke. Outside, a helicopter passed. The sound rattled the window. Then Cyborg said, Clark, Vought is moving debris from the sky tear. They're collecting it. Annie blinked. Debris? Clark looked up, sharp. Where? Cyborg's jaw flexed. Hidden routes, private trucks, black facilities. I can trace some of it, but they're using old networks. They know I'm watching. Annie felt cold. They're going to build something. Clark's voice went flat. They won't. Annie stepped forward before she could stop herself. You can't just punch your way through everything. Clark looked at her. I can stop people from dying. And can you stop them from being scared forever? Annie asked. Can you stop them from becoming quiet just because you're watching? Clark didn't answer right away. That silence felt like the real battle. Cyborg broke it. Edgar is meeting government officials tonight. He's selling them a story. He's selling them fear. Annie's mouth went dry. If the government believes him. Clark's eyes narrowed. Then I will speak to them. Annie shook her head. They'll call you an invader. Clark's voice stayed calm. Then they will hear the truth anyway. And Annie realized something that made her stomach twist. He wasn't asking permission. He was deciding. Stan Edgar sat in a conference room with men and women in suits who looked like they'd never been punched in their lives. A flag stood in the corner. A seal on the wall promised security. Edgar spoke with the same calm voice he used in board meetings. This is a national threat, he said. Unknown entities arrived through an anomaly. They have already attacked an American hero. A general frowned. You mean Homelander? Edgar nodded. Yes. Someone else leaned forward. Your footage shows him firing first. Edgar didn't flinch. Our footage shows confusion in the moment. What matters is the result. These beings can overpower our strongest asset. A senator's lips tightened. So what do you recommend? Edgar placed a folder on the table. It was neat. It was prepared. It smelled like ink and control. Emergency cooperation, Edgar said. Vought can provide resources, facilities, research, protection. One of the officials narrowed their eyes. Protection from them? Edgar didn't smile. Protection from what happens when people panic. He tapped the folder. Inside were photos of the sky crack, the burning metal, the broken screen, the public outrage. And deeper inside, hidden under defense, were requests for funding and permission. Permission to build. Permission to test. Permission to make a weapon that could stand next to a god and not blink. Edgar continued. We have a project, a containment measure. A mirror. A woman in a suit asked, Mirror? Edgar's eyes stayed steady. If they can bring power into our world, we can learn to reflect it. He didn't say the project was already running. He didn't say it already had a home in a remote facility. He didn't say he already had debris, samples, and people desperate enough to work through the night. Edgar only said what people wanted to hear. We will keep America safe, he said. People nodded, because fear likes simple promises. Homelander sat alone in a dark room in Vote Tower, staring at his own hands like they betrayed him. His knuckles were raw. The wall across from him had a dent shaped like a person. Ashley stood in the doorway with two bodyguards who looked like they wanted to run. Hey, she said softly, we're doing damage control. We're telling people you held back to protect the crowd. Shut up, Homelander hissed without looking at her. Ashley swallowed. Edgar wants to see you. Homelander's head snapped up. His eyes glowed faintly. Ashley flinched. He has a plan, she rushed. A real plan. Homelander stood. The air felt heavier. Better, Homelander said, voice low. Because if I don't get my crown back... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ashley backed away and let him pass like you let a predator pass. Cyborg stood on a rooftop later, looking down at the city like it was a broken machine. His systems buzzed with stolen signals. Vought vans were moving at odd hours. Encrypted calls were bouncing through old towers. And under it all, he could feel it. The tear in the sky wasn't just a crack, it was a connection. A pressure line between worlds. He heard boots land behind him. Damien. Robin didn't bother with greetings. "You're helping them," Damien said. Cyborg didn't turn. "I'm watching." "You're hesitating," Damien said, voice sharp. "We should take control now, before this world poisons us." Cyborg's metal fingers flexed. "This world is already poisoned." Damien stepped closer. "Then we clean it." Cyborg finally turned. His face was tight. "And who decides what clean means? You?" Damien's eyes flashed. "Clark decides, and Diana understands." Cyborg stared at him. "Do you?" Damien's jaw clenched. "I understand weakness. I understand betrayal. I understand what happens when you wait." Cyborg's voice lowered. "You're a kid carrying a war like it's a crown." Damien's hand twitched near his sword. "Say it again." Cyborg didn't back down. "You want to prove you belong. You think harsh choices make you strong." Damien's eyes went cold. "Harsh choices keep people alive." Cyborg breathed out slowly. He knew that argument. He'd lived it. And he didn't know if he was brave enough to fight it again. Butcher didn't like praying. But when he walked into a rundown church to meet someone who promised intel, he almost understood why people did. The place smelled old. The wood creaked. A figure waited in the shadows near the back. Not a priest. A man in a black coat with a metal half-face and one glowing eye. Butcher's hand hovered near his hidden gun, like it mattered. "Cyborg," Butcher said, tasting the name. "Never thought I'd invite a walking computer to confession." Cyborg's eye narrowed. "Don't talk like that." Butcher smirked. "Touchy?" Huey stood behind Butcher. Nervous as always, trying to look calm and failing. Stood a step to the side, steady like a wall. Cyborg looked at them like he was scanning more than faces. "You're the ones who hunt soups." Butcher didn't deny it. "We clean up messes heroes make." Cyborg's voice was flat. "Heroes." Butcher stepped closer. "Let's not play pretend. You saw what Vote is. You saw what Homelander is. So tell me." Butcher's smile faded. "Are your lot here to save people?" he asked. "Or to rule them?" Cyborg didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened. Huey spoke before Butcher could push harder. "We're not your enemies. Not really. We just don't trust anyone with that kind of power." Cyborg's eye flickered. "You're right not to." Butcher's eyes sharpened. "Then help us." Cyborg's shoulders tensed. "Help you do what?" Butcher's voice lowered. "Find what Edgar's building. Get in. Take it. Blow it to pieces." Added, calm, "Before it becomes something worse." Cyborg looked at them for a long moment. Then he said, "Vought is moving debris from the anomaly to a remote lab. They call it Project Mirror." Huey's stomach turned. "Mirror?" Cyborg nodded once. "It's meant to copy, adapt, reflect power." Butcher's face stayed hard, but his eyes lit up. "A weapon." "A mistake," Cyborg corrected. Butcher leaned in. "Where is it?" Cyborg hesitated, and Butcher saw it. That tiny pause. He smiled like a shark. "Ah, there it is. The guilt." Cyborg's voice turned sharp. "I'm not doing this for you." Butcher lifted his hands like he was innocent. "Do it for the people Edgar's gonna feed into that machine." Cyborg stared at him, then finally spoke. "I can't give you the exact location yet," he said. "But I can get a route, a shipment path. If you hit the trucks, you find the lab." Nodded. "That's enough." Butcher's grin widened. "Now we're talking." Huey's throat felt tight. "And your team?" Superman? Wonder Woman? Cyborg's face went still. Clark will stop Vought if he sees the full truth. Butcher snorted. And if he decides the truth means handcuffs for the whole planet? Cyborg didn't answer. That was answer enough. That night, Clark stood alone above the city, hovering high where the air was cold and thin. From up here, the city looked small, like a map, like a problem you could solve with enough strength. But when he listened, he didn't hear a map. He heard lives. A mother whispering to her child to sleep, even though the street outside was loud. A man laughing too hard because he was scared. A police officer saying, "I don't know what to do," into his radio. Fear was everywhere, not fear of crime. Fear of losing control. Clark turned his head toward the crack in the sky. He could hear it too. Not words. A pressure. A tug. It felt like a door that never fully shut. He thought of his world, of what it became, of why he stopped asking and started deciding. He heard footsteps behind him. Wonder Woman landed on the rooftop, cape and armor steady in the wind. "Clark," she said. He didn't look at her. "They're lying again." Diana's voice was firm. "Then we remove their mouth." Clark's jaw tightened. "We remove their power." Diana stepped closer. "Same thing." Clark finally looked at her. "We need a plan that doesn't turn this world into a prison." Diana's eyes didn't soften. "This world already is a prison. They just decorate the bars." Clark said nothing. Diana's gaze sharpened. "You listen to that girl." "Starlight," Clark replied, naming her by the light she tried to be. Diana's voice lowered. "A soft voice doesn't change what must be done." Clark's eyes drifted back to the city. "It changes what I choose to be," he said. Diana stared at him. Then she said, almost like a warning, "Your mercy will be used against you." Clark's voice was quiet. "Then I'll have to be smarter." Diana turned her head toward the crack in the sky. "And what about that?" "It's still open." Clark's eyes hardened. "If Vought is touching it, I will stop them." Diana's mouth curved slightly. "Good." And far below, a Vought convoy rolled out under the cover of darkness, carrying pieces of another world like stolen fire. Huey sat at the safe house table with a map and felt like a kid pretending to be a soldier. Butcher traced a route with his finger. "These trucks move at night," Butcher said. "No logos. No escorts that look official. That means it's private." Frenchie pointed to a spot with a pen. "Old industrial roads. Less cameras. They hide." MM looked at the others. "We hit the trucks. We get a location. We hit the facility. We end the project." Huey's voice shook. "And if Superman gets there first?" Butcher shrugged. "Then we adapt." Huey stared at him. "That's not an answer." Butcher leaned in, eyes sharp. "It's the only answer." Kimiko tapped the map with one finger, then pointed to a second road. Frenchie translated softly. "She says we need 2 exits. One for us. One for civilians." MM nodded. "We do this clean. As clean as it can be." Butcher's smile was thin. "Clean isn't the point. Ending it is." Huey looked down at the route, and he realized the scariest part wasn't the guns or the guards. It was the feeling that the world was being reshaped above their heads by people too strong to stop. The convoy didn't make it 3 blocks out of the city before it died. Not from an explosion, from a shadow falling over it like a moving night. Clark landed in the road ahead of the first truck. The driver slammed the brakes so hard the tires screamed. Guards poured out with rifles, shouting commands that sounded brave in their own ears. Clark didn't move. He looked at the truck like he could see through it. "Open it," he said. A guard raised his gun. "Back away." Clark's eyes flicked to the gun. He didn't burn it. He didn't crush it. He just spoke again, louder, and the command landed like weight. "Open it!" The guard's hands shook, then the truck's back doors clicked. Inside were crates of metal that glowed faintly, like they carried a memory of another world. Clark's jaw tightened. Diana landed behind him with a heavy thud. Damien dropped from a nearby rooftop, sword ready. Cyborg stayed a step back, scanning signals, listening to Vault radio. Diana's voice was sharp. "Seize it! Now!" Clark lifted one crate with one hand, like it was a box of books. The metal inside made the air feel wrong. Cyborg's eye flashed. "It's resonating with the anomaly. This is part of the connection." Damien's eyes narrowed. "So Vought is feeding the crack." Clark looked down at the guards, who were now backing away, faces pale. "You were told to do this," Clark said. A guard swallowed. We were told it was government work." Clark's voice went cold. "You were lied to." Diana stepped forward. "They still helped." Damien's hand tightened on his sword. Clark lifted his hand slightly. "No," he said. One word. A boundary. Diana's eyes narrowed, but she stopped. Clark turned to Cyborg. "Track where this came from." Cyborg nodded. "Already doing it." And in the distance, Huey watched the whole thing from a parked car, mouth open. Butcher sat beside him, grim and amused at the same time. "See?" Butcher murmured. "Gods don't wait for us." Huey whispered. "What do we do now?" Butcher's eyes stayed on the crates. "We follow the trail anyway." Because whether Superman wanted it or not, the boys were in this now. And so was the whole world. Night swallowed the countryside. The Vought facility did not look like a base from the outside. It looked like an empty industrial plant. A few lights, a fence, a sign with a fake company name. Inside, it was something else. Concrete halls, steel doors, armed guards, labs with glass walls. And in the deepest room, a machine stood like a giant metal ribcage. Project Mirror. It was made of Vought tech. It was also made of stolen pieces from the sky. A scientist stood with trembling hands over a control panel. "We shouldn't power it up," he said. "Not yet." A Vought supervisor leaned close. "Power it up." The scientist swallowed. "The readings are unstable. It's reacting to the anomaly. It's like it's waiting." The supervisor's eyes were cold. "Then give it what it wants." On a metal table nearby, sealed containers held samples. Blood scraped from a broken stage. Hair picked up from a rooftop. Metal shavings from the burning debris. They didn't have Superman, but they had enough to try, and Vought always tried. The supervisor spoke into a headset. "Tell Mr. Edgar we're starting." Huey's lungs burned as he ran through wet grass toward the fence. He could hear his own breath too loud inside his hood. MM moved ahead, low and steady, cutting a camera line with a small tool. Frenchie and Kimiko slipped like shadows, silent in a way that made Huey jealous. Butcher stayed at the back, calm, eyes sharp, holding a bag that clinked softly with weapons and charges. In Huey's earpiece, Cyborg's voice came in, low. "Guard rotations every 6 minutes. 2 blind spots. I can loop 1 camera feed, not all." Huey whispered, "You sure you want to do this?" Cyborg paused. "No." Then he added, "But yes." MM signaled with his hand. They moved. They slipped through the fence and crossed the yard. A guard turned his head, sensing something. Kimiko was there before he could blink. A fast strike, a hand over his mouth. He went down without a scream. Huey's stomach twisted. He forced himself to keep moving. They reached a side door. Frenchie knelt, hands quick. The lock clicked. They slid inside. The hall smelled like bleach and metal. Huey followed MM past a set of rooms where people in lab coats worked late, faces tired and scared. "This feels wrong," Huey whispered. Butcher murmured back, "It's Vought. That's the point. They reached an elevator. Cyborg's voice came again. Basement level. That's where the machine is. Pressed the button. The elevator dinged. The doors opened, and the power flickered. Huey's heart jumped. Frenchie whispered, "Please tell me, that is not the machine waking up." Cyborg's voice turned tight. "It is." Annie arrived at the facility's outer fence alone, not because she wanted to be brave, because she didn't trust anyone else to do it right. She wore her costume, but she kept her cape tucked, trying to look smaller, less threatening. She didn't get far before a blur landed in front of her. "Damien." Robin looked at her like she was a problem. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Annie lifted her chin. "Same to you." Damien's eyes narrowed. "This is not your fight." Annie's voice sharpened. "Everything in this world is my fight. I live here," Damien scoffed. "Then you should be grateful we're fixing it." Annie took a breath. "Fixing isn't the same as owning." Damien stepped closer, voice low. "People like you always say that until the world burns." Annie's hands clenched. "And people like you always think burning the world is the same as saving it." Damien's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, the ground trembled. A low hum rolled through the fence. Damien's eyes flicked toward the building. "That's not normal," he muttered. Annie whispered, "That's Vought." And then they both heard it. A deep, sharp sound, like metal grinding on metal, but coming from the air itself. The crack in the sky was pulsing again. Clark felt the pulse from miles away. He was in the air over the ocean, holding a nuclear missile he'd pulled out of a hidden submarine, like it was a broken toy. He'd already done it twice that week. Pulled weapons from places no one admitted existed. Sat them down gently in empty fields. Melted key parts so they couldn't fire again. World leaders screamed into phones. Generals argued. Clark listened. Then he acted anyway. Because he had lived through the day when "we'll handle it" became "we can't." He'd sworn he would never be that helpless again. But now he felt the pulse. He turned in the air so fast the clouds tore behind him. The missile in his hands was suddenly the least important thing in the world. He flew. And when he arrived above the Vought facility, he saw a bright shimmer rising from the building, like heat from a fire. Cyborg's voice hit his comm. "Clark, the machine is active." Clark's voice went hard. "Get everyone out." Cyborg hesitated. "There are civilians in there. Scientists. Workers." Clark answered. "Then we do this carefully." Diana's voice cut in, sharp. "Carefully is how they survive." Clark didn't slow down. He dropped to the ground in front of the building like a falling star. The earth shook. The lights in the facility flickered. And inside, Project Mirror screamed awake. Deep underground, Huey stepped out of the elevator and felt his teeth buzz. The air down here was wrong, like it was charged. A long hallway led to a huge lab with glass walls. Through the glass, Huey saw it. A giant metal frame shaped like a standing oval, with cables and lights running through it like veins. Workers ran back and forth, shouting. A scientist yelled, "It's overloading!" A supervisor shouted back, "Hold it steady!" Butcher stared through the glass like a man looking at a monster in a cage. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the mirror." MM's voice was tight. "We plant charges. We take the drives. We get out." Huey nodded, even though his hands were shaking. They moved along the wall, staying low. Frenchie started setting small charges on support beams, careful, precise. Kimiko watched the doors, listening for guards. Huey spotted a table with hard drives stacked in a case. He ran to it, grabbed it, and almost dropped it because it was heavier than he expected. "Got it," he whispered. But the machine didn't care. Project Mirror lit up bright white. The metal frame hummed, and something stepped out of the center like it was walking out of a bright fog. It looked like a person. At first, its skin was smooth and gray, like wet stone. Its eyes were blank lights. Its body shifted in tiny waves, like it couldn't decide what shape to be. The scientist backed away, voice cracking. "That's not what we built." The thing turned its head. It looked at the room. Then it moved. Fast. A guard fired. Bullets hit its chest and flattened like they struck steel. The thing didn't even flinch. It reached out, grabbed the guard by the helmet, and tossed him across the lab like a doll. Glass shattered. People screamed. Huey froze, mouth open. Grabbed his shoulder hard. "Move!" Huey stumbled back. The thing's head snapped toward them like it heard their breath. It took one step, and the air in front of it exploded. Clark punched through the outer wall above and dropped into the lab like a hammer. Concrete dust rained down. The thing turned slowly toward Clark, as if it recognized a bigger meal. Diana landed beside Clark, sword in hand. Damien dropped behind them, eyes bright with anger. Cyborg entered through a side door, scanning, voice sharp. "That's the prototype." Clark stared at it, jaw tight. "It's alive." The thing tilted its head. Then a red glow gathered in its eyes. Huey's blood ran cold. "It's copying," Huey whispered. The thing fired heat vision. The beams weren't as clean as Homelander's. They flickered, unstable, like a bad copy. But they were still deadly. Clark stepped in front of it. The beams hit his chest and did nothing. Clark's eyes narrowed. He moved. Not a long fight. Not a show. He crossed the distance in a blur and hit the thing with a punch that would have flattened a tank. The thing slammed into a metal wall. The wall buckled. The thing should have stayed down. Instead, it stood back up. Its chest rippled. Its skin hardened where Clark's punch landed. Cyborg's voice sharpened. "It's adapting to force." Diana didn't hesitate. She rushed in, sword flashing. She didn't swing wild. She cut with skill. The blade sliced across the thing's arm, clean, bright. The thing shrieked, not in pain, but in surprise. It jumped back. For the first time, it looked uncertain. "Good," Diana said, voice hard. "It can be hurt." The thing stared at the cut. Then its skin shifted again. A thin layer formed over the wound, like armor copying armor. Damien cursed. "It's learning." Cyborg's hand lifted toward the machine behind them. "If we shut down the core..." The thing lunged. Not at Clark, at the machine. Like it knew its home mattered. Clark shot forward and grabbed it mid-lunge. The thing twisted in his grip like a snake. Its body tried to change shape to slip out. Clark tightened his hold. Diana moved to strike again. Clark saw something then, not in the thing's face, in the room behind it. A group of terrified scientists pressed against the glass wall, shaking. If Diana swung full force, if Clark let go, if the thing exploded, they would die. Clark's voice turned sharp. "Everyone out! Now!" Grabbed Huey and dragged him toward the hall. Frenchie ran, shouting for Kimiko. Kimiko moved last, eyes locked on the fight like she wanted to help, but knew she couldn't. Butcher lingered, staring at the machine like he wanted to plant his charges with his bare hands. Grabbed him. "Now!" Butcher yanked away. "That thing's the key! That data!" Cyborg shouted. "Butcher, move!" Butcher blinked, shocked that Cyborg knew his name. Then he moved. Barely. Annie burst into the lab through a broken outer door, breathless. She saw Clark holding the shifting monster. She saw Diana ready to cut. She saw Damien circling like a blade. And she saw terrified people trapped behind glass. "Clark!" she shouted. Clark's eyes flicked to her, just a fraction. It was enough. "Get them out!" Annie yelled, pointing to the scientists. "They're not soldiers!" Damien snarled. "They built this!" Annie snapped back. "They were forced!" Damien stepped toward her, furious. "You don't know that." Annie's voice shook but stayed strong. "I do, because I lived in that pressure. I know what Vought does to people." Diana's eyes narrowed. "Spare them, and they will build it again." Annie's throat tightened. "Then stop Vought. Don't kill scared workers to feel in control." Damien's hand went to his sword. Clark's voice cracked through the tension like a command. "Damien, stand down." Damien froze, muscles shaking with anger. "You're choosing them," Damien spat. Clark didn't blink. "I'm choosing who I am." The thing in Clark's grip suddenly flared with red light. It fired heat vision point blank. Not at Clark, at Annie. Annie didn't even have time to scream. Clark moved. He shifted his body half an inch, and the beam hit him instead. It broke against his chest. Clark's eyes turned hard. No debate now. He slammed the thing into the ground with controlled force, pinning it. Diana raised her sword again. Clark spoke fast. "Victor, shut down the core!" Cyborg's hands lifted, cables shooting from his arms into the machine like metal snakes. The lab lights flickered. The machine screamed. The thing on the floor thrashed. Its body tried to shift, tried to become something else, tried to escape. Damien darted forward to help, blade ready. Clark's voice snapped again. "No killing." Damien's eyes burned. "You're making a mistake." Clark didn't look away. "Then I'll carry it." Cyborg grunted, straining. "It's resisting. The code is changing itself." Diana's voice cut in. "Then cut the power." Cyborg's eye flashed. "If I cut the power wrong, the anomaly spike could tear the whole room apart." Annie whispered. "So what do we do?" Clark's jaw tightened. He looked at the machine. He looked at the crack in the sky through the broken ceiling, pulsing faintly. Then he made a choice. "Frenchie?" Clark called, surprising everyone. Frenchie froze in the hallway, eyes wide. "How do you know?" "Your charges," Clark said. "Place them on the outer supports, not the core." "We collapse the chamber outward." Frenchie blinked fast. "That would bury us." Clark's voice was steady. "Not if I hold it." MM shouted from the hall. "Are you insane?" Clark didn't answer. He didn't have to. He was already moving. The next minutes were not clean. They were not pretty. They were fast, loud, and full of hard choices. Frenchie sprinted along the walls, setting charges with shaking hands. MM dragged scientists out through a side door, yelling directions like a man trying to stop a flood. Huey stumbled behind him, clutching the hard drive case like it was the only proof this nightmare was real. Kimiko carried 2 injured workers at once, moving like a ghost through dust and sparks. Cyborg fought the machine with his mind and his wires, trying to stop it from flaring again. Diana guarded the exits with her body, sword ready, eyes cold. Damien moved like a shadow at Clark's side, furious, trying not to disobey. And Clark held the thing down, not letting it rise. The thing thrashed and shifted, trying to copy more, trying to become stronger, trying to survive. It looked at Clark with blank eyes. Then its mouth opened, and it spoke in a voice that wasn't a voice, a broken echo. "Power! Power! Power!" Huey heard it and felt sick, because it sounded like what Vought sold, and what the regime feared. Frenchie shouted, "Charges set!" Clark's voice cut through. "Everyone out!" Cyborg ripped his cables free and ran. The last scientist stumbled out. MM pushed them forward. Annie stayed for half a second too long, staring at Clark. "Clark!" she shouted. "Come on!" Clark didn't look at her. He couldn't. He was holding a monster and a collapsing world at the same time. "Go," he said. Annie ran. Frenchie hit the trigger. Boom. Not a giant explosion. A controlled collapse. The ceiling cracked. Concrete fell. Metal beams snapped. The lab began to fold in on itself like a broken cage. Clark lifted both hands. He didn't try to stop the collapse completely. He redirected it. He held up the heaviest sections so the exits stayed clear. Dust blasted outward. The ground shook. The thing beneath him shrieked as debris slammed down. For one wild second, it looked like it would slip free and run. Clark's eyes flashed. He drove it deeper into the floor and held it there. He held and held and held until the last person was out. Then he let the chamber fall. The lab disappeared under concrete and steel. Silence hit for half a second. Then the crack in the sky pulsed hard, like it felt the machine die. A ripple rolled across the clouds. People outside screamed, pointing upward. The tear did not close, but it changed. It looked steadier. Like a wound that got stitched instead of healed. Cyborg stared up at it, breathing hard. "That machine," he said, voice tight, "was anchoring it." Diana's eyes hardened. So destroying it made the connection stronger. Annie whispered, "That's bad." Clark stood in the dust, cape torn at the edge, face calm but eyes heavy. He looked at the ruined facility, then at the sky. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who expected the universe to punish good choices. Damien's voice was sharp. "We should have killed them and burned every file." Butcher coughed in the dust nearby, still holding his bag, eyes bright with anger and excitement. "You hear that?" Butcher said. The crack got stronger. Snapped. "Shut up, Butcher." Butcher ignored him and looked at Clark. "You just made it easier for more of your world to fall in," Butcher said. Clark's gaze turned to him. "And you came here to steal." Butcher grinned. "And to stop Vought." Clark's voice went cold. "Vought is not the only threat." Butcher's smile didn't fade. "Neither are you." The air between them tightened. Annie stepped forward fast. "Stop! Both of you!" Clark didn't move. People died because Vought played with forces they didn't understand. Butcher lifted the hard drive case Huey carried with his eyes. "We've got the proof. We can burn them with it." Clark's eyes narrowed. "Proof doesn't stop bullets." Huey stepped forward, voice shaky but real. "It stops lies. That matters." Clark looked at Huey like he was seeing something rare. Not courage with power, courage without it. For a moment, Clark said nothing. Then Cyborg spoke. Voice low. "Edgar will still have backups." Diana's jaw tightened. "Then we take him." Annie's stomach turned. "You mean arrest?" Diana's eyes flicked to her. "I mean remove." Clark's voice came down like a line drawn in stone. "No." Diana stared at him. "You keep choosing softness." Clark's eyes hardened. "I keep choosing limits." Damien scoffed. "Limits are for the weak." Clark turned to Damien, voice steady. "Limits are what keep you human." Damien looked away, furious. Clark lifted his gaze back to the sky. The crack pulsed once more, slow, like a heartbeat. He understood what this meant. This world was now connected, not just to his team, to the war behind them, to consequences, to enemies that would smell the opening and come. He lowered his eyes to the people around him. Annie, covered in dust, still standing. Cyborg, torn between sides, still helping. The boys, small and stubborn, still fighting. Diana, ready to force peace. Damien, ready to prove himself. Clark took a slow breath. Then he spoke, not like a hero talking to fans, like a leader giving the world a new rule. "This ends," he said. Vought ends. The lies end. The weapons end. He looked at Butcher. And anyone who tries to use people like tools ends with it. Butcher's grin faded just a fraction, because the threat wasn't a punch, it was certainty. Clark turned to Cyborg. "Find Edgar." Cyborg nodded, grim. Clark turned to Annie. "Stay close to the people. Keep them from being crushed in the middle." Annie swallowed. "I'll try." Clark's eyes softened slightly. Try matters. Then he rose into the air. Not for show, not for cameras. Because the sky was open and the world was changing. And he could feel how fast it could all go wrong. Below him, Vought's facility lay in ruins. Above him, the crack in the sky held steady, like a door that learned how to stay open. And somewhere far away, Stan Edgar watched the first reports come in and did not panic. He only adjusted, because now he didn't need the machine. He had the data, and he had the fear. And in a world built on fear, that was almost as good as power. 2 weeks later, the city still felt like it was holding its breath. Vought billboards were still up, but many were smashed or covered with paint. The smiling faces looked wrong now. People didn't know what to believe, so they believed whatever made them feel safe for 5 minutes. And above it all, the crack in the sky stayed like a thin scar that refused to fade. Billy Butcher watched the street from a window and hated the quiet. It wasn't peaceful quiet. It was, don't speak too loud. Quiet. It was the kind of quiet you got when everyone felt watched. "Look at 'em," Butcher muttered. "They've swapped one fear for another." Huey sat on the couch with the hard drive case in his lap, like he was guarding a treasure that might explode. "They're not wrong to be scared," Huey said. "That machine almost killed a whole building." MM stood by the table, arms folded, checking his phone every few seconds. "Protests are still going," he said. "Some folks want Vought burned down. Some folks want the new heroes to take over everything. It's splitting the city." Frenchie fiddled with a small radio, listening to police channels like it was music. "They talk about curfews now," he said. "But not from the government." Kimiko sat on the floor, sharpening a knife with slow, calm strokes. Her eyes kept drifting to the sky. She didn't like open doors she couldn't close. Butcher pointed at the TV. On the screen, Clark floated above a naval base, holding a missile like it was a piece of pipe. He lowered it onto an empty runway with careful hands. Soldiers watched from a distance, too stunned to move. A reporter yelled questions. Clark didn't answer. He just looked at the cameras long enough for the world to understand one thing. He didn't need permission. Huey's voice went small. "He's stopping weapons," Butcher snorted. "He's collecting them!" MM snapped. "That's not the same thing." Butcher's eyes stayed cold. It becomes the same thing when he decides who gets to keep what. The TV cut to a press conference outside Vought Tower. Ashley Barrett stood behind a podium with shaking hands and a practiced smile. She read from a script while her eyes begged the cameras to forgive her. "We at Vought," she said, "are committed to transparency." A loud buzzing sound cut her off. Every microphone on the podium died at once. Ashley blinked, confused, and then the giant screen behind her changed. It didn't show a logo. It showed a simple line of text. "Tell the truth." Ashley's smile collapsed. Cyborg's face appeared on the screen, stern and tired. "This is not a brand," his voice said through the speakers. "This is a record. This is evidence." The screen began showing names, dates, payments, and footage. People in the crowd gasped. Some cheered. Some cried. Some threw rocks. Ashley stumbled back like the air slapped her. Inside the safe house, Huey whispered, "He's still doing it." MM nodded slowly. "He's keeping the truth alive." Butcher didn't look impressed. "Truth is great," he said. doesn't stop a god from making rules. Huey stared at him. So what do you want? Butcher's eyes flicked to the sky. I want this world to belong to people again. He didn't say, and I want every soup dead. But Huey heard it anyway. Stan Edgar sat in a quiet room that didn't look like a bunker, because Edgar never needed to look afraid. The room had a table, a lamp, and a phone. That was it. Across from him sat 3 people, a government official, a Vault lawyer, and a man in a suit who kept wiping his hands on his pants. They all looked tired. Edgar looked calm. The mirror facility is gone, the official said. You told us it was contained. Edgar nodded once, as if hearing a sales report. It was contained until it was attacked. The lawyer opened a folder. We have prepared a statement blaming a rogue terrorist cell and foreign interference. The man wiping his hands whispered. People saw it. They saw the flying man stop Homelander. They saw the screens. Edgar looked at him. People see what they are shown. The official leaned forward. Your company is bleeding. Your hero is unstable. And now, those outsiders are dismantling weapons bases. Edgar's eyes stayed steady. That is why you need me. The official frowned. You? Edgar folded his hands. You need structure. You need a plan. If these outsiders decide your laws do not matter, your police cannot stop them. Your armies cannot stop them. The official's throat moved. So what are you suggesting? Edgar's voice stayed even. We invite them into a deal. The lawyer blinked. A deal? Edgar nodded. A contract. The man wiping his hands whispered, You can't contract a god. Edgar looked at him like he was a child. You can contract anything if you offer the right incentives. He tapped the table once. Offer him a world that doesn't fight him, Edgar said. Offer him help building order. Offer him an end to chaos. The official stared. And what do we get? Edgar's answer was simple. Safety. He didn't add the second part out loud. And I get my place back. Annie January walked through a crowded street in plain clothes. No costume, no cape. People recognized her anyway. Some shouted, Starlight! Help us! Some shouted, Traitor! Some just stared like they were trying to decide if she was real. Annie kept moving. She had a meeting with Clark in a place without cameras, or as close to no cameras as this world allowed. It was an empty school gym at night. The lights were off. The floor smelled like dust and old sneakers. Clark stood near the basketball hoop, looking too big for the room. His cape hung still behind him. Cyborg leaned against the wall, scanning signals, eyes tired. Annie stepped forward slowly. Thanks for coming. Clark nodded. You wanted to talk. Annie took a breath. People are scared. Clark's voice was calm. Vought made them scared on purpose. And now, Annie said, they're scared of you. Clark didn't deny it. Fear keeps people from hurting each other. Annie's hands clenched. Fear also keeps people from living. Clark's eyes stayed on her. In my world, we tried hope. We tried trust. We tried laws. People still died. Annie's throat tightened. So you're going to fix it by force? Clark's voice didn't rise, but it landed heavy. I'm going to stop the lies. I'm going to stop the weapons. I'm going to stop people like Edgar from selling death. Annie swallowed. And if someone disagrees with you? Clark's jaw tightened, just a little. Then they should prove they're not protecting evil. Annie shook her head. That's not how freedom works. Cyborg spoke quietly from the wall. She's right, Clark. People will fight you even when you're right. Clark looked away for a second, toward the gym door, as if he could hear the whole city outside. Then they can fight. Annie stepped closer. That's the problem. They can't. Clark turned back to her. For a moment, he looked tired in a way that didn't match his strength. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Annie's voice softened. "Limits." Clark's eyes narrowed. "Limits kept my world from stopping tragedy." Annie shook her head. "No. Cowards kept your world from stopping tragedy. People who wanted comfort more than responsibility." She paused, then said the next part carefully. "And you're not a coward. That's why I'm asking you to choose something harder than control." Clark stared at her. "What?" he asked. Annie's voice was steady now. "Give people a way to speak back. Give people a way to stop you if you ever cross the line." Cyborg's eye flickered. "That's not possible." Annie looked at him. Maybe not physically, but morally, politically, publicly. Clark's face went still. "You want me to accept oversight?" Annie nodded. "Yes." Clark said nothing. Then, very quietly, he asked, "And if oversight becomes another lie?" Annie answered honestly. "Then you call it out. You don't crush it." Clark held that thought like it weighed something. Butcher chose a different kind of meeting. He didn't ask politely. He made it happen. Clark was hovering above a power plant at dawn, listening to the hum of machines, watching workers arrive like ants to a job they didn't love. Then Clark heard Butcher's heartbeat approach and didn't look surprised at all. Butcher stood on a roof nearby, hands in his coat pockets, acting like this was normal. Huey stood behind him, pale, eyes wide, like he wanted to run. "Morning," Butcher called. Clark floated closer, stopping in the air a few feet away. "You're loud?" Butcher grinned. "And you're a menace," Huey hissed. "Butcher." Butcher waved him off. No, this is a grown-up conversation." Clark's eyes stayed calm. "You broke into that facility." Butcher nodded. "And you saved those lab rats." "Lovely." Clark's voice turned colder. "Why are you here?" Butcher's grin sharpened. "I'm here to make you an offer." Clark didn't blink. "I'm listening." Butcher stepped forward. "Kill Homelander." Huey's stomach dropped. "Butcher." "What?" Butcher kept going. "Kill him. Kill the rest of them that can't be fixed. Then leave. Go back through your crack in the sky and take your little empire with you." Clark's eyes narrowed. "You want me to murder people?" Butcher's voice turned hard. "Don't pretend you don't understand. He's a rabid dog with lasers. He kills for fun." Clark's jaw tightened. "I can stop him without killing him." Butcher laughed once, sharp. "Yeah? And then what? You lock him up forever? Who guards the cage?" "You. Always you?" Clark's voice stayed even. "If that's what it takes." Butcher's eyes flashed with anger. "That's the part I hate." Clark stared at him. "You don't hate me because I'm dangerous. You hate me because you can't control me." Butcher's face went still. Then he smiled like it hurt. "Good. You're learning." Clark looked at Huey. "And you?" Huey swallowed. His voice shook. "I don't want anyone dead." Butcher snapped. "Stop it." Huey forced the words out anyway. "I want people safe, and I want people to choose how they live, even if it's messy." Clark held Huey's gaze longer than he held Butcher's. Then Clark spoke to Butcher again. "No." Butcher's smile faded. "No." "No," Clark repeated. "I won't kill because you want me to." Butcher's voice turned low and dangerous. "Then you'll do what? Build a new Vought with a nicer face?" Clark's eyes hardened. "I will end Vote, and I will end people who profit from suffering." Butcher snorted. "And who decides what counts as suffering?" Clark's voice dropped. "I do." Huey flinched at that. Butcher smiled again. Slow. "There it is." Clark didn't attack him. He didn't need to. He just floated back and his voice was flat as stone. "Stay out of my way," Clark said. Butcher called after him. "Or what? You'll save me to death?" Clark didn't answer. That silence was its own warning. The confrontation that decided the next step didn't happen in a back alley. It happened on a stage. Because this world loved stages. Edgar arranged a global security summit in a guarded building packed with officials, cameras, and nervous people pretending they were brave. He invited Clark. He invited Starlight. He invited a civilian panel. He even invited Homelander, because Edgar believed Homelander still had value as a symbol. Homelander arrived late, smiling too wide, eyes bright with anger. He wore a new suit with brighter colors, like a repaint would fix his shame. Annie stood near the back, feeling the weight of the room like a stone in her chest. Cyborg stood in the shadows near a wall, monitoring signals, expression tight. Diana watched from a balcony, arms crossed, like a judge waiting for a guilty verdict. Damien stood beside her, restless, eyes sharp. Clark arrived without fanfare. No dramatic landing. He simply appeared at the front of the room, like the air made space for him. The room went quiet in a way that felt forced. Edgar stepped up to the microphone, calm as ever. "Thank you," Edgar began, "for coming. The world is facing an unprecedented event." Clark interrupted him, not loudly, but clearly. "Stop," Clark said. Edgar paused, then smiled slightly. "Of course." Clark turned to the officials. "He lied to you. Vought made monsters. Vought hid murder. Vought built a machine that almost tore your world apart." A nervous official said, "Mr. Edgar claims it was a rogue facility." Edgar's voice stayed smooth. "We all make mistakes, but Vought is still the only organization with infrastructure capable of responding." Cyborg stepped forward. He raised his hand. Every screen in the room changed. Not to a logo, not to a slogan. To raw footage, contracts, orders, emails, video, names, dates. Edgar's eyes didn't widen, but something in his face tightened for half a second. Annie felt a shaky relief rise in her chest. Truth was here, in a room that usually ran on lies. Edgar didn't panic. He adjusted. "These files," Edgar said, voice calm, "have no context. They can be manipulated." Cyborg's voice cut like metal. "They're yours, with your signatures." The officials shifted, murmuring. Homelander laughed loudly, like he was trying to take control of the sound in the room. "So what?" Homelander said. "You want to arrest the guy who made me? Go ahead. I dare you." Clark looked at Homelander. "Sit down." Homelander's smile twitched. "Make me." Diana's posture tightened. Damien's hand drifted toward his sword. Annie's heart pounded. This was the moment that could turn into a massacre. Homelander's eyes glowed red. He wasn't aiming at Clark. He aimed at a row of officials. A threat, a tantrum, a message. Before the beams could fire, Clark moved. Not a blur this time. A simple step. Clark placed his hand on Homelander's shoulder. Homelander froze. His heat vision flickered and died like a candle under a lid. The room gasped. Homelander's voice shook with rage. "Don't touch me." Clark's voice was low, calm, and final. "You're done." Homelander tried to fight the hold. He couldn't. He thrashed like a child in a grip he didn't understand. Edgar watched the scene with cold interest, as if he was observing a market shift. Then Edgar did something almost no one expected. He leaned into the mic. "And this," Edgar said, voice smooth, "is exactly what I warned you about." He pointed at Clark. "A being with no legal authority," Edgar continued, "controlling our assets and threatening our leaders." An official snapped. "He just saved us." Edgar's eyes stayed steady. "Today? And tomorrow? Who checks him? Who stops him?" The room fell into a dangerous kind of silence, because Edgar had found the crack in people's courage. not the sky crack, the human one. Annie felt sick. She saw the trap. She saw how easy it was to turn fear into support. Clark looked around the room. He could hear the heartbeats. Some were grateful. Some were terrified. Some were already turning. Clark let out a slow breath. Then he did something that surprised even Diana. He released Homelander. Homelander stumbled back, shocked, then furious. Clark raised one hand, not as a threat, as a request. "I'm not here to be your king," Clark said. Butcher, watching from a hidden hallway screen with Huey, scoffed. "Sure," Clark continued anyway. "I will not pretend I can be stopped by your handcuffs," he said, voice even. "That would be a lie, and I won't build my world on lies." He looked directly at Edgar. "But I can choose limits," Clark said. Annie's breath caught. Clark faced the officials again. "I will dismantle Vought," Clark said. "Legally, publicly, and completely. You will do the paperwork. You will hold the trials. You will write the new laws." Edgar's eyes narrowed slightly. "And if they refuse?" Clark's voice stayed calm. "Then the world will see who protects murder." He lifted his gaze to the cameras. "And I will do one more thing," Clark said. Cyborg's screens changed again. This time, it wasn't just Vought files. It was a live feed of weapons caches being removed from hidden sites around the world. Missiles, chemical stockpiles, illegal labs, proof. Clark wasn't just talking. He was acting. He looked back at Annie just once, then back at the room. "I will stand watch over the anomaly," Clark said. "I will not hide it. I will not sell it. And I will not let anyone use it." Diana's eyes tightened. Damien whispered, sharp, "You're giving them too much." Clark didn't look away from the room. "I'm giving them a chance." Edgar's voice stayed calm, but colder now. "You're naive." Clark stepped closer to Edgar, not threatening, just present. "I'm tired of men like you," Clark said quietly. "Your power comes from making others feel small." Edgar held his gaze. "And your power comes from being unstoppable." Clark nodded once. "That's why I'm choosing limits." He turned to the officials again. "Arrest him," Clark said. The room froze. Security hesitated. Because Edgar was Vought, and Vought was money, and money was comfort. Then one officer stepped forward, hands shaking, and placed cuffs on Edgar's wrists. Edgar didn't resist. He didn't shout. He simply looked at Clark and said softly, "You think this ends me?" Clark didn't answer, because he wasn't trying to win a debate. He was trying to change what normal meant. Homelander, forgotten for 1 second, snapped. He lunged at Edgar with a roar, eyes glowing. "This is your fault," Homelander screamed. Clark moved again. He caught Homelander by the chest and lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Homelander kicked and fought, face twisted in rage and panic. Clark's voice stayed calm. "You don't get to kill him," Homelander spat. "He made me." Clark's eyes hardened. "Then be better than what he made." Homelander laughed, wild. "I can't." Clark looked at him like he was looking at a broken thing. Then he turned and carried him out of the room. Not like a trophy, like a danger being removed. Diana watched from above, lips tight. Damien's eyes burned. Cyborg stared at the screens, jaw clenched. Annie stood still, shaking, because she knew this was only the first day of the new world, and the world would push back. But at least it pushed back in the open. Weeks later, the city had new signs, not Vought signs, handmade ones. Some said, "Thank you." Some said, "Go home." Some said, "Let us choose." Huey walked past a courthouse where people lined up to testify. Some were victims. Some were former Vought workers. Some were soups with their heads down, finally hearing the word accountable said out loud. Huey's phone buzzed with a message from MM. "Pick up milk for Janine. Be quick." Huey smiled despite himself. Normal tasks still existed. That mattered. He crossed a street and looked up at the sky. The crack was still there. Smaller some days, larger other days. Like it was breathing. A shadow passed over him. Clark hovered high above, watching the crack, listening to the world, cape moving softly in the wind. Not smiling, not posing, just guarding. Huey kept walking. He passed a food cart where a tired vendor was selling hot dogs, yelling, "2 for 1, end of the world discount." Huey heard someone nearby laugh, and it sounded real. Sat at a kitchen table later, with his daughter across from him, helping her with homework. She scribbled on paper and frowned like math was a villain. Leaned in. "Okay," he said gently. "Slow. One step at a time." Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. It didn't stop his hand from steadying the page, because some parts of life had to keep going, even when gods were in the sky. Frenchie and Kimiko stood on a rooftop at dusk. Kimiko held a small bouquet of cheap flowers she'd picked up from a street vendor. She stared at them, like she was learning what quiet meant. Frenchie whispered, "We live in strange times." Kimiko nodded once. Then she pointed at a big billboard that used to show Homelander's grin. Now it showed nothing. Just a blank screen. Frenchie smiled softly. "Better empty than a lie." Butcher stood alone on a different rooftop, smoking, eyes narrowed at the skyline. He watched Clark hovering near the crack. He watched patrol drones that weren't votes. He watched new rules being written in courtrooms. He watched people act like they could breathe again, even while they kept looking up. Butcher's jaw tightened. He didn't trust Clark. He didn't trust anyone with that kind of power. Huey joined him quietly, holding 2 coffees. "You look like you want to punch the sky," Huey said. Butcher took the coffee anyway. "Maybe I do." Huey leaned on the ledge. "He didn't kill Edgar." Butcher snorted. "He didn't need to. He just proved he can put anyone in a cage." Huey looked up at Clark. "He also proved he can choose not to." Butcher stared at the crack in the sky. "For now." Huey's voice was quiet. "That's all anyone ever has." "For now." Butcher didn't answer. He didn't like hope. Hope felt like a setup. But even he couldn't deny that Vought looked weaker than it had ever looked, and the world looked less fake. Late one night, Annie stood in the same empty gym again. Clark was there, hovering inches above the floor like he didn't want to scratch it. Annie looked up at him. "You did it." Clark's eyes stayed steady. "I started it." Annie swallowed. "People are still scared." Clark nodded. "They should be. This world has been hurt." Annie took a breath. "But you chose limits." Clark's voice was quiet. "I chose you to remind me." Annie blinked. "Me?" Clark nodded once. "You spoke when it was risky. You stood between stronger people to protect weaker ones." Annie's throat tightened. "That's what heroes are supposed to do." Clark's gaze drifted to the window, toward the sky crack. "In my world, I stopped trusting people." He looked back at her. "I don't know if I can fully change," he admitted. Annie nodded slowly. "Then don't promise miracles. Just keep choosing." Clark's face softened slightly. "I will." Outside, the crack in the sky pulsed faintly, steady like a slow heartbeat. Annie stared at it, then back at Clark. "Life keeps going," she said. Clark nodded, just different now. And for the first time in a long time, Annie felt something small and simple under the fear. Not a grand promise, just a real thought. A safer world could still be a cage, so someone would always have to watch the cage, and someone would always have to speak back